Hi, everyone. Welcome to Disco's Augmenting Human Potential podcast. I'm your host, Candice Faktor, co-CEO and co-founder of Disco, the #1 academy, AI-powered academy platform. And I'm so excited to be here with you on this journey. We created this podcast to explore how AI is transforming the way we work and learn. The goal is to bring together thought leaders, innovators, practitioners from all different backgrounds to discuss how the world of work and learning is changing at lightning speed. And today I am so delighted to have this awesome guest, Yash. Yash, how do I pronounce your last name? Tekriwal? Yeah?
There you go. Perfect.
All right, Yash Tekriwal, who has such an amazing background. Yash is head of education at Clay, a very hot and exciting GTM AI product. And Yash is just like a world of energy and insight and innovation, former high school teacher, ed tech founder, data scientist, consultant, coach, and so much more. And he is channeling this amazing background into his role at head of education at Clay, which I personally think you are at the bleeding edge of what customer education is going to be. And so we're delighted to have you here. How are you today?
I'm great. Yeah, delighted to be here. Excited to talk about learning. I could talk anyone's ears off about learning for as long as they're willing to listen. Excited to jam with you.
Oh, so excited to jam with you. And I'm like loving your outfit. So let's start there. Like, where do I get one of these like awesome floral clay gowns that you're wearing?
Unfortunately, the answer is these were designed to make everyone envious because
yes, it's working. It's working.
These are Clay employee onlys. But I think Puneet, our head of people and brand, does an incredible job. We have wonderful hats, we have t-shirts, we have all sorts of other Clay swag that we'll be sure to send you.
Oh, amazing. We will equally send you some amazing disco swag because you can't have a name like Disco and not have amazing swag. So there you go.
There you go.
So let's take it back a couple years. So first off, how did you get into wanting to build such amazing learning products? Tell me your background when it comes to learning. There's many relevant and exciting names in your background and experiences. So tell us a bit more about how you got into running customer education at Clay.
Yeah, I think my background is the same as everyone's with being a learner. I think one of the best things about education is that we all experience the same sort of obviously different education experiences growing up, but as a student going through the traditional American high school system, college system, I was never a student that really fit well into the buckets of traditional learning and education. I always spent a lot of time outside the classroom doing a lot of really interesting experiential work that I felt was better for me. And by accident, really, in college, I ended up running, at the time, data science workshops and like general entrepreneurial workshops through a nonprofit in the area. And people really loved the non-traditional approach that we took to how to teach people doing things. It's a very flipped classroom model. It's very exercise-driven. It's very practical. And I fell in love with that process. And so the accident that then led to this haphazard, eclectic career in education was that we started this online program to increase access to the types of workshops we were running back at that nonprofit. And that got so much overwhelming demand, thousands of people applying for it, that we spun it out into its own business. And I decided to work on that business coming out of college instead of going into the traditional consulting role that I was thinking about.
I love that. I love that for so many reasons. So Yash, trivia, disco trivia. Do you know why we are called Disco?
Actually, I do not. Tell me more.
All right. So just like you, I equally loved experiential learning. And when we were starting Disco, we realized that I've actually never taken an online course that's just videos. And I was like, why is that? It's because I don't learn like that. I learn through experiences. And so the root word for Disco is discovery, discussion, discourse, and it's actually the Latin word for learn. So that's why we're called Disco, even though we're really fun people and love making engaging experiences. It's actually for the very thing you're talking about, which is people learn better through discourse, through discussion, through discovery. And so my love of what you're doing already is like shining through.
Yeah.
So cool. So Tell us a little bit more. For those that don't know, do you want to just give one or two lines on what the amazing product of Clay is? And then you can maybe share a little bit more about what Clay's customer education looks like.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off here a little bit. So I think for those who are unaware, Clay, we call it like a creative GTM data orchestration tool. So to unbundle some of that jargon, right? It's a really flexible and powerful tool you can use across any of the customer-facing parts of your organization where data matters, which tends to be every part of the customer-facing org, right? It's sales, it's marketing, it's customer success, it's expansion, it's renewals. You need to have the right information about the right people in order to engage in the right way.
For
But
sure.
so often as companies scale, it's really hard to get the right picture of all of your data at that level of scale. Lots of people, most of the enterprise companies I've seen we work with, have whole teams of people dedicated to manual cleaning, entry, updating. Some even have whole teams of engineers dedicated to building internal products. And so what we're trying to do with Clay is give that power and ability to a small team of elite technical RevOps-minded people to make it better for everyone across the org.
Totally resonates. I think we're a customer, and in fact, I know we are a customer, and I think this whole world of GTM is radically changing, just like learning is radically changing. So tell us a little bit more. I know that education plays this incredibly central role in the strategy at Clay. Tell us more about the kinds of education products that you're building.
Yeah. So I think first, like on why education is so important to a company like Clay, and I see it becoming more important in the world broadly, is that we've entered what I would call like the fat, not lean era of software tools. I think not to say that lean startup doesn't apply, but the value in software in the era that we're at is now more in how do I give people enhanced functionality, power, capability. And there's only so much compromise you can make on how simple an experience that product is going to be. I think of other tools, like Figma is a really good example. You can't just jump into Figma and start making things right away if you want to be a product designer. There's a learning curve. The same is true of Webflow, Zapier is similar. All of these products are incredibly powerful and they're worth the investment because they give you access to these powers of programming in a much more accessible way. And I think Clay is exactly the same thing. I would say that education has played lots of different roles at the company throughout our growth process. And if I think about the like three values we have for education here, it's number one, learning is about experience, not content. I think there's this myth that people still, they still prescribe, right? So I'm a visual learner, I'm an audio learner, or I'm a kinesthetic learner. But as you and I probably both know, the research has time and time again.
Totally.
That everyone learns better through all three.
Yeah.
And so experience is at the core of all three of those. I think the second one is what we were just talking about, right? It takes a village. I think we are social beings. We learn socially, whether or not we do it intentionally. If I'm just sitting down, reading a textbook on my own, which is the equivalent of most online learning experiences today, it's up to me to then translate that knowledge into practice, which is what creates muscle memory, retention, skill, and ability. And then the last one, which I think gets to the heart of your question, is you have to adapt to your growth stage. So adapt to the stage of learning that you're at. So to give you an idea of what we do at the company now is very different from what we did 1-2 years ago when we were just 8 or 9 people in an apartment. Education was really just embedded in customer success and sales. We were hopping on calls, doing hand-to-hand combat with people, relaying all of that product feedback directly to the engineering team, iterating fast as possible to try and get to some semblance of product market fit. And then in a post-product market fit world, you still have the different stages of growth and evolution. To fast forward to what we do today, it's incredibly important for, number one, us to educate all of our employees internally on Clay. If you're joining the sales team, the customer success team, the marketing team, it's really important that you not only understand what the product does, but how you can be a product expert when you're talking to customers. And then it's equally important for, I would say 80 to 90% of our engineers are incredible engineers, but they're not that familiar with GTM technology. They didn't have careers in sales or marketing. They don't know how to use a Salesforce CRM. And part of the complexity of a tool like Clay is we're not just Clay. We have the 100+ integration providers and growing that we sync with. You need to be really well versed in Clay itself and also all of the tools that compose this like beautiful GTM orchestration. And so we're teaching people how to think about product use cases, updating their product features, thinking about user empathy at the end of that cycle. And then we have a whole set of experiences that we're still working on and building externally to customers. And that works across our PLG motion. We have async content that is necessary but not sufficient for learning.
Right.
We have live cohorts that we run that are experiential, 1 week sprints modeled on the CBCs that you know really well. And then we also have variations of that for all of the growing partners that we're onboarding and working with.
So cool and so aligned like with how we see the world. Tell us a little bit more about how your experience with Alt MBA, who we're big fans of. They were a Disco customer. We have a shared love of Seth Godin and what he's had to say about learning and learning experience. How has this experience impacted your approach to education at Clay?
I would say it's been the core foundation for all of it,
Amazing.
honestly. Right? I think something that Seth did really well, and the rest of the Alt MBA team, like I would give a shout out to Marie, who's been a mentor for a long time, is experience doesn't have to be predicated on content, nor should it always be. One of the things that I always loved about Alt MBA is that it felt and the experience was like something that Seth was running and was a part of the course and the spirit and the attitude. But Seth actually never showed up live in the course, except for sometimes at the end at graduation. I think there was a total of like 58 minutes of recorded video from Seth over the 4 weeks that we all got to watch and experience. But 95% of what made Alt MBA so magical for me and the thousands of other students that did it was getting to collaborate with other like-minded people, solving the same problems, getting really honest and helpful feedback on how I was thinking about my own problems, and being able to feel that benefit in giving feedback to others. I think when we help everyone grow together, it not only helps us grow as people, but it helps other people feel like we're a part of something special. And so I think we're in the early stages of, but trying to design a lot of, especially the cohort learning experience around some of those models. How do you equip people with the resources to work on actual projects that will give them the learned skills that they need to succeed in the world? And how do you best help people work with one another, especially in a virtual environment that we're not yet literate in working fluidly with, so that it still feels human and it still feels connected?
You hit the nail on the head. It really is why we created Disco, right? It was like in the pandemic when we saw this isn't going away, and it's amazing technology, but it can really dehumanize work. And we wanted to bring the humans back to the reason that we're doing the work. And I think the whole idea of cohorts and learning with and from other people truly has like marked difference. And maybe can you share a little bit about the impact of some of the cohort-based programming that you've run internally and externally, or maybe use 2 different examples?
Yeah, I'll give one externally, I'll give one internally, right?
Great.
So I think on the external side, cohorts for the last quarter have been an experiment, because I don't really know any other companies that have run a cohort-based learning model for onboarding. And so we pitched it at the company. I think people were excited about it. Naturally, me more than everyone else, because I see it as the future of onboarding to tools. But we were like, okay, let's test it and run with it. So I bootstrapped the whole thing on like Airtable, Softers, Clay, etc. And the student feedback we've started to get is overwhelmingly positive. I think the cohort program has like a 9.4 NPS. It was just 2 weeks. And I was there live for 1 to 3 hours in each cohort. But the kinds of feedback we get in the channel are like, I would never have been able to learn Clay without this. This is the like step-by-step introduction I wanted. Being able to see what other people do and think and the problems that they feel helped me feel less alone in my own journey. It's all of those elements of experience and community that we want to be giving to people in a more systematic way. And then internally, because you asked about it as well, I think we've only recently started doing more cohorted onboarding. So because we're hitting the pace where we're hiring batches of people every 2 weeks, it's important that we put all those people through the same cohesive experience. And what we're now starting to hit our stride on internally is everyone gets to build a Clay project of their own. They get to work with each other and build this camaraderie as a group of people who share one special thing that no one else will share with them, the time that they started in this moment in the company's journey. And it's our best way, because we learn socially and through experience, to give people all of the tips and best practices that help make them successful more quickly going forward at the company. I think something that's really hard and beautiful about an in-person culture is that a lot gets absorbed through the cultural memory of the company. But then as you grow, you don't want all of your new hires to just have to figure out the cultural memory of the company.
For
You
sure.
want to give them a proper induction into it.
I love that. It sounds like you're really pioneering the way. And what's so great is from Disco's perspective, like we see a lot of different cohort-based onboarding programs and customer programs. And by far we hear you're not just educating customers, you're actually creating advocates, right, for your products and for your culture when you actually invest in the human connection. And it's, you get out the way as well, right? It's like people are learning from each other versus like just from you, which I think is really powerful. Now, I'm sure you experienced a lot of friction in sort of your pilots, right? Because that's what pilots do.
For sure.
Tell me about how you think AI is going to play a role in scaling your education efforts. How did you use AI in this first pilot of these experiences, and what is your hope that AI will be able to do as you scale your both customer education and internal education programs?
Yeah, it's a very meaty question. I think part of what's been holding back education from being learning centric for a long time is just that content is necessary but not sufficient, like I said earlier. But content takes a lot of time.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time to keep your content up to date. It takes a lot of time to curate your content so that it is perfectly tailored and sized to your audience. And then as you grow, you have more audiences and you have multiple variations on the content that you want to be giving to those audiences. And so it's easy. I totally understand the trap that we all naturally fall into around content being the core pillar of an education experience. I think part of what we've started to do with AI, but we're still very early, as I'm sure many are on the journey, is leverage AI to accelerate the content development. Because the information is all there half the time. What you're doing as a content writer on an education front is you're just rewording the same information from previous posts a different way across dozens of different articles, guides, how-tos. And that is the opposite of creative work. It's mundane work. You're not building anything new. I think what AI can do is help you take out the mundane. It's still not perfect, and we're working on custom GPTs to be able to do this across different types of content, but it removes a lot of the time associated with getting that content to good. And then you can only have a human focus on taking good to great to amazing. And so that's the current state of how we leverage AI in our education efforts. And then the future state that I dream about is I think the future of learning is incredibly personalized. And so what AI should be able to do, we will not be doing this for a while just because we've got plenty of other priorities, but I dream of a Clay University where users get to log in and have all of the lessons be custom fit to their company, their industry, their examples. I think anytime you're able to move asks on the user to beneficial for the user and not, you always see a huge win. So for example, a lot of universities ask people to log in so that they can view progress, they can monitor the amount of lessons someone has taken, and then maybe upsell or engage at different stages of the learning cycle. I think if you can get people to create accounts on a university page because it's going to lead to them having a better learning experience, that's the future of real learning from a content perspective.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and it deeply resonates. I'm excited to show you Disco's product roadmap for 2025 around personalized generative learning, right? Which I think is what you're saying is, you know, there's so many different GTM motions, and there's so many different sizes of companies, and there's so many different industries. And so if your examples can actually be fine-tuned to the very learners that are trying to use these tools, and even the integrations that somebody may have if you're in healthcare versus if you're in marketing, or you want to put it in the context of the learner so that they're having the most relevant experience. And so I love your vision, and it's a shared one. And I think that is really where we get excited, is like, how do you not take the human out of the the learning, but actually make it more personalized so that the learning can be more human. Like I can actually have a project that makes sense for me to learn with and from. So very cool.
Totally agree.
Amazing. Last big question for you, and if there's any other audience questions, would love to hear them as well. What do you think are going to be some of the biggest trends in customer education and AI-powered education for 25? Like, where do you think the world is at when it comes to designing customer education?
Yeah, that's a big question. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think we're in good company here that I think more and more really high quality education is going to become experiential in some way, shape, or form. Cohorts are currently our answer to it. Webinars are a version of it. But experience can mean multiple things, right? It can also mean I'm flying out to SF and hosting an in-person 2-day workshop with a bunch of people. It can also be a conference. And I think better, connecting education objectives to every touch point that people have with a company on the experiential front is a big part of the future of education. The other side of it that I think a lot about is AI is everywhere. And I think we're currently in this modality, and there's a big debate about whether or not people will need to become really good at prompt engineering. And my strong take, at least given the current state of AI, is that at the very least, people will need to become prompt literate. I think we're already seeing meta prompting and other tools abstract away the need for someone to be able to go in and write a really great prompt from scratch. But ultimately, everything is still technology based. So the ability to think programmatically and be able to understand why you may or may not be getting your desired outputs from whatever your AI tool of choice might be is incredibly important to giving people the results that they want. So I think something I've found a lot in teaching people Clay, but then also teaching people how to use Claude, OpenAI, Clayagent, etc., is that there's not always a clear understanding of I am asking the prompt to do X and it is giving me Y. And the root understanding or skill to have there is really like a programming 101 thing. So I think more and more people will become technically literate in that way.
I've never heard of the term prompt literate, but I think it's like a brilliant, like hashtag prompt literate for 2025. That makes a ton of sense. And I'm very aligned with thinking about prompt engineering as a programming language, right? For generating the right kind of answers. And I think tooling, that's going to help, but there's ultimately teaching people the skill of like really smart prompt engineering. It makes a ton of sense. One question is, what advice would you give other education leaders or startups that are looking to use an academy or a university as a strategic lever for growth?
Also a good question. I guess I would give two pieces of advice. I would say piece of advice number one is don't build a university or academy before you need to. I think it's worth noting that even at Clay, we didn't really launch a university until it was such a dire pain that people were asking for us to build it over and over again. Because I think a lot of people prioritize education at scale before you need to deliver education at scale. If you're not yet at the I need to deliver resources at scale stage, keep doing things that don't scale until you hit that point where you need to scale. That would be number one. Number two,
maybe you can share why. What is it that you're avoiding by doing that?
That's a good point. Yeah, I would say what you're avoiding is building a bunch of content around a product that's not ready yet. So you really want to get your product to the point where you feel like you're starting to feel the pull of PMF. And when you have PMF, you will understand it, right? You have the inbound, you have some sort of PLG growth or a really great SLG version, and you're acquiring customers faster than you can iterate on product. That's like emotional feel of it. And then you need to be able to scale the way you communicate and update and experience customer learning. But even after you hit that sort of PMF pull, something else that we're going to try and build systems for is that you still need to keep iterating on product to make it better and better so you stay on top of your PMF. And you don't want to go through the whole exercise of we've built something that's not necessary for scale. And then once we start to hit scale, there's 12 different product updates. Maintaining an async help center with docs is also a beast of its own. We are still even figuring out, like, when we make updates to core parts of the product, What are we going to do? How are we going to go through every single page, every single video where that screen is displayed and make sure it's up to date? Because if it's not up to date, you're going to get more customer complaints than you are special mentions, because they're saying, I don't see the screen that you're showing me.
I'm only laughing because I've lived through that exact cycle, because our product has changed a lot, and we think about that a lot in even something that we think at Disco AI should be able to do in the future, right? Is like, how do you have a system that AI can update, right, your customer education in all the different places? Because now imagine you have your onboarding academy and your customer academy and partner academies. So I think that's a really good call out.
Yeah, I definitely agree, right? Like when AI gets to that point, I do think I'll take back what I just said. You can build your academies a little bit earlier.
Yeah,
but acknowledge that there's
for sure. Yeah.
Mind.
I have one question here. Somebody says, one thing that's interesting about Clay is how your partners have actually stood up many of their own learning programs and boot camps. How are you thinking about enabling them?
That's a really good question. So in full transparency, I've been spread across multiple parts of the company for the last few quarters because I've been here for a while. We are continuing to get tons and tons of requests from people to have Clay featured in their own RevOps academies, Clay featured in their sales academy. And the way that I think about this long term is, if you come to Clay and you want to learn Clay through Clay, we should have one of the best programs in the world for you to be able to do that. But also, I don't care that we are branded as people to learn it. So one of my big focuses actually for next quarter is going to be, let's find all of these partner programs that are teaching people how to use Clay. Let's reach out to all these programs that should be teaching people how to use Clay, and just make Clay one of the default languages that new professionals entering the space think of as their default tool.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful way. So to end off, I would love for you to share I always like to say, what's your highest hope for 2025?
That's also a good question. I would say my highest hope for 2025 is that we're really able to actually nail what you just talked about, which is make it really easy for anyone who wants to teach Clay to whoever they're teaching it to do so without having to send me an email and go do a manual workshop at a program. And I think if we can do that, very similar to how you've seen partner programs scale selling for large companies like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, if we think about partner programs being able to scale education and enablement for a complex product, I think everything else follows downstream from there.
I love that. What I love about what you're saying is twofold. One, it's communities that really build companies, right? And so building out your partner ecosystem is super important. And the second part is like, what actually builds partner ecosystems is education. So the more you can enable partner academies to actually sell, and not even sell, to understand and learn the power of your product, the greater the success will be for everybody involved. And I think it's just a meta example of what we mean by learning together and that we're all interconnected. So on that note, I would say happy holidays, and we're just huge fans of what you're doing. And so we hope that this is one of many conversations and the beginning of hopefully ways in which we can partner in the future. So have a great end of 2024 and a wonderful holiday season.